Last week we briefly talked about responsible AI with, and I think I had a wonderful time with John. I didn't see him today, but I think he will join along the line. So we said that it's so this responsible AI is a continuation from the explainable. So the explainable AI, interpretable AI we have been talking about is actually a sub part in responsible AI. It's a part or one part of it, to say. So responsible AI have so many branches, and the reason is because AI is growing this exponentially, and exponentially in a sense that it's now a commodity that is cheaply available to everyone. Everybody now talks about things like ChatGPT and all that. They now have them in their pocket. So the more it evolves and become more usable among people, the more it also have the risk increases because it could fall into the wrong hands. Like I told you guys last time about a textbook called Weapon of Mass Destruction. And if you have time, you could look at it. You will see that some of the things that the author of that book highlighted were, imagine this AI falling into the wrong hands, like terrorists, for example. I don't know if you followed the news recently where there was this massive attack on uh, facilities of military in Nigeria by Boko Haram, and the military said the Boko Haram uses drones
Yeah, yeah,
to carry out the attack. So these are some of the issues that we talk about the evolution of this AI, that this when this technology falls into, and drones uses what we call computer vision. And I really look forward to when we come to deep neural network, so we could talk about some of these things. So these risks and challenges that AI comes with, it makes experts to be very, very concerned about it. And notable risks, for example, the issue on bias and discrimination, where some of these neural networks, like convolutional neural network, I think the famous one was when it is used for object detection, especially in cases like cancer. When you train the model on mostly light-skinned people, it becomes very difficult for it to detect when you testing it on the black skin. And this kind of a thing could have impact even in facial recognition systems. The errors for black people is high. And the reason is because whenever in the training sample, these things becomes rarer, the examples becomes rarer, the machine doesn't see, the algorithm doesn't see those underrepresented groups as much. So because it doesn't see them, it finds it difficult to be able to make predictions with them. And other issues that comes with violation of ethical and legal standards of people. Because, for example, ChatGPT have been facing a lot of lawsuits as of, I think, last year and even this year, because the training data they use from the internet, such as textbooks and other collections, they did not seek permission of the authors of these literatures. So because of that, it becomes a very big issue because some of those people begins to sue them for intellectual property issues and also patent issue. So you don't, because a very good example is um and I hope we'll have time to talk about it, is this crawling. There is this web scraping that we do with AI approach. I think a notable, I'm trying to think about, Beautiful Soup is the package that we use a lot to do that web scraping. That approach, most of the time, because you can easily just go to the website and crawl the data that you want, it has implication because it's not every website that allows that. So before you do that, it's advised that you should look at the website and read about some of the things that you should do and you cannot do with their data set. So by the time you do that and it gets to them, they could easily sue you and it will become a very big challenge. So the fact that you could do crazy things with AI does not mean you should go about doing them, because some of these things have implications legally. I remember one of the first things I had to really deal with was the fact that it's not every data set I could share, especially because I'm working in the medical domain. I have to make sure that if I have to share data, for example, in my GitHub repo, I have to identify them. You have to make sure that you de-encrypt them such that the names of all the sensitive information, like the postal address of the persons that you use, their names, or sometimes even location, are not involved, so that nobody could trace them back, because someone can take their information and trace them back and use it against them. So some of these concerns make some of these data sets that you cannot. And remember, there is the open science platforms that encourage us to share data so that it could be reusable and other people can validate what you have done, because there are a lot of challenges that has to do with p-hacking, that also has to do with uh, publish or perished sort of concept. So some of these things make uh, before the open science framework begin to spring up, most of these things were done in hiding, and some of the authors, even some of the academicians, they have to even withdraw their um, honorary degrees from them, because they discovered that they forged or fabricated the data set they use. There is this one recently that happened with, I think, a notable professor in, was it Cambridge or Harvard, one of the universities. He ran into challenge. I think this was somebody that have grown to, I think, a dean or something. He has grown very far in the academic world, but they discovered in his PhD he fabricated some data that were not true, and the publication won an award that even led to a Nobel Prize or something. So only for them, I think it happens in the US. I actually didn't take note of the exact story, but I remember reading it not too long, you know. And then later on, only for them to discover it was not true. And then they have to withdraw his PhD from him. So there are several cases like that that you begin to see around. So that's why the open science framework wants us to share data. But again, you have to share data that are not de-identified, so that the persons or the where you picked them, they can't easily just trace them. So um, there are other examples, like I told John last week about, like the gods, these mathematical models were opaque. They are workings invisible to all but the highest priest in their domain, mathematicians and computer scientists. Their verdicts, even wrong or harmful, were beyond dispute or appealed, and they tend to punish the poor and the oppressed in our society while making the rich richer. A good example of that happens for the JAM application or stuff that happened recently in Nigeria. The moment I saw that 70 or 80% of the students failed, I immediately raised this concern that this is wrong. You can't have an exam where 70% of the students failed. Of course, we know there is a decline in education in Nigeria right now because of so many distraction that is distracting our younger ones. But that does not mean that we do not have students that are very focused and determined. Then when you look at now the patterns, you will see that previously some of the areas that were having very good performance in the exams, those areas were now the ones that are affected, like the southeastern parts of Nigeria. So that was not a good one, and it creates a problem because a lot of people now begin to look at it from the lens of ethnicity and tribe, and they begin to question it that, oh, this was a deliberate attempt to sabotage the southeast, and all that. So but these things was because the men or the people that developed that systems, they failed to take into account some of the risks that follow. How about the stock market? you see recently of the is this CBEX or something that happened in Nigeria, and I saw a lot of people, and I follow a lot of Nigerian news, so I'm very current, even though I'm not there. So I saw a lot of people crying online, and some people even committed suicide and the rest. So when you see some of these things, it's because they do not take into concern the risks that happen when these things crashes. It always comes like a pound of flesh to haunt people whenever these things are not being done properly. Like yesterday, for example, I was developing an app because the last one of the conference I went last time at I think was it Alan Turing Institute or one of the institute in London. I presented the poster. It was an analysis we did where we decided to use the social demographic variables of CKD patients to group them, to see if we could find trajectories or subtypes alongside, leaving what the clinicians have done already because the clinicians were able to put them into different subgroups. So, but when we observe it by allowing the data to tell the story itself through data-driven approaches, we were able to identify, I think, 5 groups. But previously, I think clinicians put them on 10 subtypes. But when looking at those 5 groups that we observed, we now decide to go a step further by using them to also do some sort of multi-class prediction, supervised prediction learning to see using the clinical biomarkers that were measured for this patient at baseline. And I think we had a very good performance. However, when I went to the workshop, some of the clinicians that were there, they really loved what I did. But the question they asked me was, can you create sort of like an app for us or a web application or a dashboard where we could easily impute when we have a new patient, we could put in their information and we could easily see their trajectory. And then we could know if the patient is going to have a fast decline because the fastest was the group we call drift, and then followed by I think Eden also and all that. Then we have the ACHR, and then we have and the first group. So, but in each of these groups, you will see a clear pattern. Some are young people, some have issues with previous smoking or current smokers. And then there are some other groups where you will see high prevalence of diabetes or hypertension, and so on and so forth. So I started so when I came back from the conference, I now have to now focus on that because we need to get the paper out. So I started trying to create the app, which I did yesterday. But I discovered that when I decided to play around with it, change some of the random patients to see, it does not uh, giving me what I want. So I have to pause and say, today I will continue to investigate these bugs and see how or what is causing this kind of thing. And then I want to embed this interpretability so that if the app tells me this patient belongs to this subtype, the app needs to tell me what are the factors that made it to say it belongs to that subtype. So we will need to make sure that AI is used in a very responsible manner, not just anyhow. Okay. So we talk about so many things around job displacement and inequality that as AI continues to automate things, we will continue to see these issues around people not being replaced by AI, agentic AI, like we see these days. A lot of RAGs and agentic AI springing up, and most times these agents could act as research assistants and interns. They could even act as co-workers. So now you can have a company set up where you don't need to employ staff. You just need to have different agentic AI configured. You can have an AI that will be acting as your receptionist, not like a physical receptionist we're saying, but like a chatbot, okay, that somebody could drop message and the AI could assist the person, direct the person could ask, what kind of services do you have? The AI could say, okay, we offer this kind of services and all that. And then maybe the only time you need to come in is just to come and talk with the client and you close the deal. So it will help to cut down costs. But at the other end, you see that most of the humans that are acting as the customer services and the retail guys will lose their job because now they will be replaced by this agentic AI. So some of this AI comes with this factor. But again, when you look at it, it's replacing, but it's also creating new jobs because people could now, instead of leaving their work, they could augment their knowledge, learn about how these systems work, and they will begin to do it. I was watching videos some days back on how the movie industry is facing a lot of threats because now with AI, you could replicate even different cameras and all that. And with that, it's going to affect these guys. They don't really need to pay this expensive stuff on studio and all that. And that again will become even the actors themselves, the AI is beginning to replace them. And that which again is going to make them go out of job because AI could act like them and even act it even in a more professional way. So all these things will be a threat if you don't learn about it. You need to know how these things function, and then you could also be able to stay relevant in your field. So if somebody is a plumber, the next question that I used to say is that you as a plumber ask yourself, how can AI help me to be a better plumber? If you are a writer, how can AI help me to be a better writer? If you are an actor, how can AI help me to shine the light in what I'm doing to even do it in a more better way? It's to augment you, not really to replace you. That's why we are advocates of a human-centric AI. Then there is the issue around security. Like I told you guys last time that we will continue to see heightened issues of security, cyber threats, that will come as a result of hackers trying to break in because of the advancements we now have in areas of generative AI. So we will continue to see this threat increase as the day goes by. So we need to be able to train experts to be able to identify this threat and even stay ahead of this threat. Like recently, we discovered the rising issue of paper mills. And these paper mills, guys, they target AI ready data sets that are out there. So what they do, they will go use this data set, and with the generative AI, they could produce a mass different publications that will be able to beat the reviewers. So the reviewers will not even detect it. And with all these things they are churning, it will have a very big effect, not just on policy making, but in area like pharmacy, in area like medicine. You hear human lives are involved even in gene editing and all that. You could imagine when AI unveiled these things and these things were done with malicious intention, it will ruin a lot of lives. So it was an urgent call and a need. And we are really trying to see how we could focus in that area of research to begin to expose some of these things and shine a light in them. There is this enhanced data that is easily targeted by these guys. And not just the enhanced data, there are so many other data sets that they now target them. And that's just in the biomedical informatics domain that we just saw. How about the ones that are happening in other areas, finance, agriculture, and so on and so forth? So there will be that heightened exploitations that will be coming because of this AI could discover vulnerabilities in systems. And once it discovers it, it uses it. You know about the deep fake. And even in weapons, autonomous weapons. I told John last week about the thing that happened during the Cold War, that a Russian general picked up this signal that he thought it was an incoming thing that was from the Americans, and he wanted to strike. But he just used his initiative to say, no, he needs to see how it turns out. And that saved the whole drama because if it was an AI, it wouldn't have you reasoned. It could have, because the AI is trained most times based on this logic. So it will react immediately when it sees something that looks like fake or something. So, stuff like that. So the threat, it could becoming a national threat to security of lives and property, public safety, even some of the digital content we see today, they are not helping matters. So this misinformation too will be heightened. And I will talk about the area of climate change. That most of the time you will beginning to see issues because these generative AI, deep neural networks, they use a lot of GPUs, they use a lot of clusters, to run on them. And by the time they do their computation using this humongous amounts of energy, they emit a lot of greenhouse gas effect that have effects on the society. It has effects on the environment, like the recent fire outbreak we saw in California and other parts of the US. There were some experts that were accusing some of these data centers that were run by some of these experts in OpenAI and the rest, that they are part of what contributes to it. Because when some of the lakes and the water reservoirs they have, that they used it to cool their systems, their data centers. And by the time they used up, when the fire service guys got to use those water, when they ran out of water, they were helpless and the fire was just spreading. So we'll be seeing this whole thing happening because the AI needs lots of energy to be able to train this model. And I gave him example about how the Barrett and ChatGPT consume thousands of kilowatts and all that, which is equivalent to, I think, 1 million or so miles of driving, the carbon dioxide these things emit. So you could see it comes with a very big cost to our environment. But one thing that many people need to understand is that there is always a trade-off between model size and intelligence, because model size is not always equal to intelligence. So the larger the models does not mean it will be better always. So we need to see what works. And if we have other alternatives, then we should explore them instead of going for a complex model at all time. So this risk that it comes with, it comes in different dimensions. It could come in form of fairness and equity, accountability, and also autonomous, because we begin to try to automate systems which will remove people from it. So some of this misuse, it creates a lot of concern, especially when it begins to touch the area of security. Like I said, imagine what Boko Haram achieves because they were able to use drone. They were able to destabilize so many depots or so of military. So this AI entering into different places like drones and latter weapons and the rest, we'll begin to see a lot of attacks from these terror organizations. And that's not a good one. So we need to develop technology such that it could be responsible and humans could actually monitor these things so it doesn't go out of hand. So we also have to know that we have to strike a balance between transparency and proprietorial interest, because sometimes um, we discover that many of the AI organizations need to make profit, so we don't expect them to share everything. A good example is the DeepSeek that China did last time. Immediately, China shared how they developed it at a very minimal cost and even energy saving and the rest. All the other guys started adopting their approaches. So sometimes you see that the owners of these systems, they will be worried because if they release everything to the public, they will likely run out of business. Because it's a business model, it's a business happening in Silicon Valley. Why do you see the US trying to right now? I was telling my wife today that the president have restricted Harvard University from admitting foreign students. Why are they doing all these things? It's because there is an AI race. There is a war going on AI. Everybody wants to be the master of the game. So no one wants the other person to pick his or her brain. So because of that, we begin to see issues around this transparency and proprietorial interest, because everybody wants to make sure he's ahead and everyone looks up to them. So I talk about the case study of how AI was used in criminal justice to create a tool called Compass. And that tool called Compass was to help them to classify or, to carry out effective policing. But later on, they discovered that the tool was having issues around racial bias. And that became a very big issue, you know, and they have to think of how they could create it in such a way that overcome this bias. And I also talk about the deep fake and misinformation that also comes with AI. You see a videos of, sometimes of Obama talking or even Donald Trump talking, but when you look at it, you see it wasn't Donald Trump. It was someone that just sat behind and, create. So just what's next? The thing we needed to do is to make sure we create solutions that are transparent, interpretable, that also take care of this unnecessary bias, and they are ethical in such a way that we are not creating something that will have a problem at a long cost. A good example of tool like the IBM AI Fairness 360-degree is used for audit, especially to mitigate issues around bias in AI model. And a very good thing, good part is the explainable AI, which helps to interpret the decisions of a black box model. And then we talk about, we have already looked at, of course, the approach of sharp and line in our last classes. Then robust security. You need to create the system that will have, for example, passwords such that someone cannot just hack into them and use them or design them for their own evil purposes. So the Google Adversarial Training Toolkit helps to solve some of these issues around it. And sustainable AI, again, we need to make sure when we are developing model, we incorporate that part that would help to, for example, use things like renewable energy. If you have things like renewable energy, it's likely, going to be a very clean energy, and also to reduce the computational layers. Sometimes you don't need to use a very deep networks in order for it to get a very good performance. So take care of these things. And there are other things like the GDPR and European EU AI Act that has been enacted on transparency and human rights, and also applying AI in high risk domain. You need to look at some of those things and see how and what you should or should not do in the course of your research using AI tools. Then for the society, you cannot just be working in isolation. The human society is an ecosystem that involves everybody from top bottom approach. So when you are developing AI, always think about the diversity and also try to reduce the blind spot in your design. Don't just develop AI, and focus on one group and then you marginalize another group. I don't think that's right. Make sure you put in all these things into consideration. And there are organizations that are doing great on this, like the UNESCO, and also public awareness and education of stakeholders, like we are doing right now, help people to know some of where they should and should not apply this AI. Then the ethical framework, of course, there are so many organizations have their different guidelines, but generally things like Microsoft Responsible AI Principle Guide, it's a very good way of using AI while you're doing a product development. Collaborative governance. There needs to be a public-private partnership such that will bring experts from the different industries so they could be able to look at this and chart a course for the future. And international collaboration. We shouldn't just work as in isolation. There should be a way where experts from different countries could look at this and say, this is prohibited, this is not supposed to be used. I think in war, there are some weapons that are not supposed to be used. There are some chemical weapons also that is restricted. You don't use it. So there should be this general consensus on some of this, what should and what should not, the standards that they could use, around the world in order to mitigate things like misinformation and autonomous weapon. These areas need a lot of concern. And I think the OECD is doing great in helping to promote trustworthy AI worldwide. Then supporting AI for good initiatives is also something that we all have to be doing. So having talked about this, now I